All right, Ivy Podcast listeners, what is up? Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. If you've had a chance to check out a few of the episodes that I've done before in the past, and you know that we are all about talent delivery, talent conceptualization, workforce ecosystem, and that is exactly what we're going to be diving into today. I am your host, Angela Alberti, and I am very much excited to have a sit down with Batman, the Batman, well, the sourcing Batman out there. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Mike?
Yes. My name is Mike. I do go by Batman. Pretty cool with it. I have been in the recruiting space for a little over 15 years now, since I was 7, which is great. And why are you laughing? And I was an agency side contingent recruiter for like 10 and a half, almost 11 years, and started my own company. Coming up on the September will be 5 years, and have recently focused on sourcing, specifically creating a new form of sourcing, organization, deliverable, etc. So pretty excited about that. Outside of just Wayne Tech, which is my company. Yes, it's a play on Wayne Technologies from Batman. No, my name is not Wayne. Yes, if you email me and call me Wayne, I will make a funny, snarky joke back to you. Other than that, I am the executive vice president on the board for ATAP, the Association of Talent Acquisition Professionals. So a nonprofit in our space. An indoor cycling instructor because I like being the center of attention. I do speak at a fair amount of conferences. Please cite previous, I like being the center of attention, as well as I do like giving back. I'm real snarky. I'm from New York and I swear a bunch. So like apologies ahead of time.
Apologies in advance, folks.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, there will be swearing. And I think other than that, you and I had met at a conference and kind of got talking to this like future of work and the way people think about our industry, and thought it would be cool to jump on and have a cool chat together.
Awesome. Well, Mike, Batman, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about today's episode, and you honestly are a breath of New Yorker fresh air, if you will.
It's the F word, I know.
As fresh as it gets up there, guys. But we did have a chance to meet at NPA, and fantastic speaker. I didn't have a chance to see you at the show, but shout out to our members.
Not going to hold that against you.
Yeah, kind of, maybe slightly. But we have a chance to sit down. And one of the things I really wanted to start off with, you came from the agency, you sit on the board of the organization ATAP. When was this moment, right, where you decided, you know what, screw it, I'm going to take the leap of faith. I'm going to go ahead and start Wayne Technologies? Because I'm sure leading up to that, there was this clear identification or need for it within the market. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, there's 3 separate points to this. There's the first point of starting Wayne Tech. There's the second point of taking the leap of faith. And then there's a third point of what we currently do now and offer the market. And they're all 3 very different. So why did I start Wayne Tech? Because I've been fired from every job I've ever had since I was 12 years old. I'm pretty open about it. I don't love it. I'm not proud of it. But the truth is I'm very good at what I do tactically. I'm very bad at being told what to do. And when people pay you money, they don't like that, apparently. So it was almost 5 years ago now, all right, on September, I had been let go again from another job. And my wife, Crystal, who is the most supportive, patient, grace-giving human in the world, basically told me like, hey, maybe you should start your own business. Like this kind of keeps happening to you. So I went out and started my own business, but I still had this like fear of that leap of faith, right? To your point, that's exactly what it is. And, I had those thoughts running through my head of, what if I fail, and afraid of being a failure. This was also at a time where I was concerned, like, how am I going to provide for my family? What happens if I fail there? By the way, caveat to this, we don't have kids, and Crystal is the breadwinner of our house still. So like, total bullshit. But there was that like ego piece of like, oh, what do I do? Right.
This hypothetical family, what are we
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How am I going to do this?
It's amazing what the mind does, right? When you're in that moment.
Yeah. I need to provide for my family. No, you don't. No, you don't at all. So she supported me through that. The first year I contracted with a couple of other recruiting agencies, helping them set up training and technology. And at the end of both of them, they both, were like, great. Okay, awesome. Now we want you to do some recruiting. And I'm like, no. So those ended the same way every other job had. And at the end of about a year, this is 2018 now, both my wife, my career coach, and my sister, in differing degrees of directness, basically said like, hey, like, get your stuff together, like, just do this. Don't wait anymore. So that is when I actually took the leap of faith, was towards the end of October. It's also the time I spoke at my first conference, which was ERE. Thank you again, Todd Raphael, David Master. And it went really well. It winds up, I love being on stage. Again, not really surprised to hear that. So I then also met a company called Paired Sourcing. It was Jer Langens and James Temple, and they needed help with some of their sourcing. And I had previously only done contingent recruiting. Yeah. So you pay for a placement and I can work my butt off and still not get paid, which I think is BS. So introduces me to this idea of sourcing, and they did sourcing on demand. They still do. Jer's a good friend. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm a millennial and I really don't like talking to candidates. So this kind of rocks. So they were kind enough to bring me in and show me the ropes. And I helped them with a bunch of their clients while they were going through an organizational change. Towards the end of that organizational change, when things I think were most in flux and they needed to kind of take a pause, I said, hey, can I kind of go and do this on my own? I'd like to do this, but on more of a contract basis. That is where Wayne Tech was actually born. So in 2019 is where Wayne Tech went, hey, this is what we want to do now. So 2019 is when my brand started exploding. I spoke at 19 conferences, 24 webinars. End of 2019, I hired my first employee, Nikeo. Yeah. He's still kicking butt. And then 2020, a week and a half before COVID lockdown, I hired my second employee. It was super timing. Julie is awesome. We were blessed enough to continue growing actually through COVID because of the unique way that we work. So it kind of has changed a little bit of our perspective as to what's possible and how we do things. There's no charted territory for it. So we're making it up as we go, iterating and improving upon it. And we're now up to 6 people total as a company. And last year was my personal breakout year for presentations, recordings, et cetera. We did 64 podcasts and conference talks. So, which by the way is objectively too many. That's simply too many to do. Not ever again. And now it's now.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. Mike, it's great to hear about how you've had to pivot and be agile in terms of, I guess, harnessing truly what is, Wayne Technology is all about. And I think it's fascinating in such a time right now, right before we press record, really conceptualizing what the future of work is. And I'd love to hear about what it means to you, particularly being and leveraging a technology platform in the life of a recruiter or a sourcer. What do you think the future of work means?
There's 2 different ways I look at it. One is as a tactile, contributor, an IC. The others is a leader. I'm assuming you want me to focus on the IC side on this one?
All of it. Focus on all of it.
Oh, great. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So on the IC side, this is going to sound really weird. Okay. It's a combination of getting away from tooling and more tooling.
Yeah.
So if you're like, oh, hey, Batman, that's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. Yes, I hear you, but hear me out. Okay. So the idea of one ring to rule them all, which we're not going to name the name of the platform that I might be referring to, but I call them the Blue Devil. You can figure it out. Is no longer LinkedIn is no longer the and if you're working at LinkedIn listening to this, I'm not sorry.
Okay.
Yep, the Blue Dev. So that idea of the one ring to rule them all, one solution is gone. There's too many resources out there to aggregate everything into one place. The idea of trying to find a silver bullet is also gone. People ask me all the time, and I spoke about this at the conference, what's the best sourcing tool? I'm like, that's a silly question. Let me give you an analogy. If someone's building your house and you go, hey, what's the best tool to build a house? And they're like, a hammer. You should fire that person. Right? If you build my house and the only tool you're using is a hammer, like, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So what's the answer? Yeah, the answer is, what's your use case? Yeah. And I think as companies start answering that question more, they're going to start realizing that their use case can't be solved by one thing.
Yeah.
So this idea of automation, I think is going to be taking over. And if you're listening to this now going like, oh, duh, automation, first off, cool your jets. No, I'm kidding. Second off, when I say, yeah, come on, right, New Yorker, right? Yeah, I heard my mom. That was my mom coming out. I was like, ugh. Thanks, Mom. No, for real though, I'm not talking about things like Calendly or web scraping, which, by the way, awesome. You should use tools like that.
Right.
What I'm talking about is getting more into this RPA, robotic process automation, and more into these like no code and low code solutions, where what we're doing isn't spending time on process stuff or operational stuff. We're spending time on things that involve creative thinking. We're now at a point where we can train machines and computers to do the busy work. So if you are a person who is checking resumes coming in from Indeed and lining them up with jobs in your company, please know that your job is in jeopardy in the next 5 years. Just call a spade a spade.
Yeah, it is what it is.
That's pattern matching. Computers do that.
Right.
What we need though is creative thinking. How do we find these folks? Where do these folks live? All right, on the internet. People have homes. It's very rare that somebody lives totally off the grid. Truck drivers, probably best spot on Facebook. Veterinarians, Instagram's a really great place for that. Developers, dev.to, GitHub, Stack, right? So now we've got all these different avenues to aggregate data from. How do we bring them all together? That's where the automation comes in. So that's the more technology, yay. The less technology is automate and then be human. So as an IC, we all know we're trying to find the right candidate and everybody's reaching out to all the good candidates. And I need to spend all my in-mails because whatever company owns that technology is the absolute worst. So what are we doing about that? Do we send more in-mails? Do we send in-mails to very specific people? Or do we decide at some point that we're all human and therefore maybe I just be myself and I join the communities that I live in? And by live in, I mean, if you're a tech recruiter, join the communities for software engineering, not go to a meetup and try and find candidates. I mean, join the community, be a part of it. One of the greatest examples I can think of for this is Ala Pavlova over in Amsterdam. She recruits almost predominantly in the gaming industry, and she's a hardcore gamer. It's like she goes to these gaming conferences and these tech conferences, and she actually can speak to some of it. She's not a coder. And so it's like, hey, how active are you in being you in the world you work? And so the last thing for the IC that I'll point to, and it speaks to this, is it was a study done at Harvard. What year is it? 4 years ago now? God help me. Giancarlo, I think, was one of the guys' names. There were two, and shame on me for not remembering. But it's all about a theory called the self-complexity theory, which is to state as technology increases, we're all experiencing this paradigm. I was going to say dilemma, but it's not. It's a paradigm of the parts of our lives that have always been societally completely separated from one another and compartmentalized, now being combined. The example they give, which I found very funny in the journal article, it's a scientific journal article, I can send it to listeners if they want, is imagine going on a first date to a bar, seeing your parents there and also your college professor. And it's like, whoa, that's really weird. But if you think about it, it's not. How often do we have issues in Zoom calls, right? Like we're doing right now, where one of our kids runs behind us, right? Or, dog starts barking and we're like, oh, yeah, sorry, dog's barking. Yeah. Do you remember what it was like 3 years ago? when something like that would happen. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Let me mute myself. Hey, be quiet, you know? And it's like, whoa, you're a human and you have kids. Kids make noise. It's kind of their thing, right? They only do a few things. That's one of them. So we're all kind of becoming desensitized to that, like work at work and home at home. And so for an IC, bring your whole self to work. For a leader, this is more complicated, so I'm going to keep it really short. This is a talk I'm doing at conferences. It's also a book I'm working on right now, which is the idea of a leader is changing. I'm not talking about a manager. A manager is an operational person. And if you're offended by that, please understand you're a manager, not a leader. A leader is someone who inspires, motivates, and is someone who is typically found in the trenches, not someone who is guiding others who are in the trenches. What I mean by that is if the phrase servant leader doesn't connect with you, you're probably a manager. No offense. Leaders are, it's tough to see people in those positions because
it's tough to realize that you are not the servant leader, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, manager and leader are not equivalent terms. I am a terrible manager. Terrible. I'm disorganized and my follow through sucks. Great leader, though. And I think this idea of being a great leader is coming out to look very different than what people think it does. It's not a skill set thing in terms of how good you are at the job. That doesn't determine your leadership. Leadership for me is really boiling down into a few pillars, right? Which is your vulnerability. How do you show up at work in terms of when you're making mistakes or when you need help or when you're struggling or you're feeling some type of way? How authentic are you? Are you actually showing who you really are? I don't hide. You guys have heard me say I've been fired from every job I've had. I can tell you, and if you've seen my talks, I deal with addiction. I've been in a program for a little over 5 years now. So that's who I am. It's kind of a take it or leave it, but at least you know what you're getting. There's transparency, which comes out to that idea of what you see is what you get. There is no man behind the curtain. Right? It's not Wizard of Oz. There is no secret sauce. Caveat, if you have like a really proprietary like data science algorithm that does predictive modeling or something, cool, that's your secret sauce. I totally get it. Yeah. If not, you don't have secret sauce. You're just standing on the shoulders of giants you don't know about. It's very, very different. And that extends so far as to say for the transparency within Wayne Tech, we have an open comp policy. Everybody knows what everybody makes, including me. Wow. My salary is out there. And my W-2 is shareable at the end of the year. I even share my budget sheet with everybody because I don't have anything to hide. If you have something to hide, fix your shit, not your transparency. And if you're thinking, oh, I would never share what I earned, then you either earn too much or you pay too little. Fix your problem, not your ability to hide that problem. And it really just comes out to like, are you showing up to your job how you are? The last two things are creating collisions. So this is from a book by Daniel Coyle called Culture Code. If you haven't read it, please, as a leader, go out and read this book. And it speaks to this idea of, are you creating instances for people to bump into each other, figuratively or literally, to cause interactions? That can be interactions with some rub that cause people to kind of go back and forth. It can be interactions of people finding alignment, finding the ability to talk to each other. Are your team meetings focused operationally, or do you genuinely have this type of like culture or environment where people talk about what they're doing in their lives? And then the last is collaboration. How are you actually set up for collaboration? There's so many companies I hear who create this idea of like, oh yeah, our strategy or go-to-market team, we're so great. We do all of this stuff. And our sales team is also super great. However, sorry about that if you heard that. However, on the downside, they happen to compete with the sales team. So nobody wants to bring them onto sales calls. Nobody wants to have them, as a part of like the process. And so you're creating, as opposed to collaboration, you're like, oh no, our teams are great together. Yeah, but how are the teams collectively? Is your actual structure organizationally collaboratively sound? Meaning, are you set up that people's jobs, roles, responsibilities, and metrics create collaboration and foster it? Or are you battling that to get what you perceive to be the highest results? They are not the highest results. So I'm going to stop there because I could do this for another hour.
No, we have another hour and I'm excited for the rest of the episode. But I really like the breakdown of the perspective that you gave. I see leader, what the leadership track looks like in the future, how it's vastly different and it's evolving from the typical connotation of what leadership was. And I want to dive into that a little bit further, but I want to touch on one of the points that you made when it comes to this reputation that we hear within the space, this connotation, I would say, when it comes to AI and segments of automation that will basically make extinct what we define as a recruiter. And I say this, if I look at staffing industry analysts, top 12 predictions of 2022, one of them was referencing the fact that the recruiter will be no more, right? It will be a role that's oriented more around the human element and not anymore around the redundancies and the operational tasks. But that because of, I guess, what technology is doing, there's always this boogeyman association, just as there has been throughout the timeline of recruiting and staffing in general, the .com, the job boards, the MSP, the VMS, the recession, the gig economy. There's all of these different evolvements, but now it seems to be that this boogeyman called AI and automation that's going to terminate an entire type of work or line of work. And maybe your example as somewhat touching on that. So what do you say to those folks that look at AI and automation as the boogeyman or as something that could potentially terminate their job?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely will. For sure. Yeah. In the next like 200, 250 years, robots will probably be able to do anybody's job. So like, for sure. Are we going to see that? Nah. But will it? Yeah, absolutely. Right. I would say to that person, hey, are you a farmer? Well, no. Okay. So that revolution in history didn't affect you, which is great. Do you ride a horse to get around? No. Okay. So that revolution in history didn't seem to affect you any. Do you have the internet at all? Have you ever accessed okay. So that revolution didn't really get you at all. So all of a sudden this one now is the one that's going to get you. Like, okay.
Got to pivot, folks. Pivot.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, hey, this is progress. That's what happens. Second, if your job can be done by a computer, you're not doing a good job. Just hear that for a second. If your job can be done by a computer, you're not doing a good job. You're just doing a job. What can't computers do? Creative thinking. Computers cannot come up with something from nothing. So if I don't tell a computer what animals are in general, and I put a computer, a robot filled with AI in the woods, and a bear next to him or her or them, however they want to be identified, guess what? That robot's going to stand there and try and figure out, what is this thing? And then it's going to get ripped to shreds by a bear. It can't come up with this idea of the innate, creative extrapolating of data from completely unknown quantities. We're not there yet. Eventually, maybe, I assume, right? But if you're in a forest and you walk around a tree and there's a bear there, I'm assuming you've never been face to face with a grizzly bear. So do you have that experience? No. Do you know what a grizzly bear is based on definition? Yes. What are you going to do when you're face to face with a grizzly bear as the very first thing that you do without any thought or control? You're going to pee a little, and then you're going to run. You're going to run instinctively. You're going to fill with, the adrenaline, and just boom, you're gone. Fight or flight kicks in. These are things that aren't present in technology.
Wow.
The idea of saying, draw me something beautiful.
Wow.
And here's the deal. What's beautiful to you might be different than what's beautiful to me, but you're going to draw something. And it's not going to be based off of perhaps anything that's ever existed before. So what does that mean for recruiting? Well, that means that there are a couple of areas. There's strategy. The idea of strategy is you can teach strategy to someone. You can't teach new strategy to someone because it's new. So if it hasn't been created yet, you can't teach it to a robot. You can come up with algorithms, come up with creative ways of doing things, but ultimately an idea of doing a thing in a way that hadn't been done before, can't teach a robot. Great example. Do you know what platform I've used to date that has the highest response rate consistently, like over 80% response rate consistently?
TikTok.
Venmo.
Wow.
Find someone on Venmo and I send them 2 pennies and say, hey, I thought I'd reach out in a more creative way. Honestly, I have a role I'd love to at least run by you. I think you're going to dig it. Just my 2 cents.
Ooh.
Oh, right. Savage.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy response rate. Why did I think of that? Because I was talking to a buddy of mine, Josh, who was like, oh, that'd be so awesome, and brought it up. And I was like, I think I can do that.
Stealing it. Yeah. There you go.
Yes, try it.
Yeah.
You can't. Let's try it. The robot. So
right?
Yeah. Find strategy, ways to use strategy, and then find ways to be creative. When you're reaching out to your candidates or you're training your team to do this, don't put your job description in the email. A robot can cut and paste. Find a reason to reach out to that person that a robot may not be able to identify because it doesn't necessarily understand uniqueness of personality.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Thank you for that. I want to go off into a different direction and talk about which you inspire me. And I remember us being at the show and how much I was taken aback by what you guys have done when it comes to the culture and the culture that you've looked to build. And you alluded a little bit to that in terms of your leadership style and really understanding, am I managing? Am I leading? Am I inspiring? Am I drawing from a type of culture? Can you walk through what your opinion is or what you've looked to build at Wayne Technologies when it comes to the culture and how that embodies with your own values?
Yeah, I can. I think first is to identify where you guys are at as a company or as a team. If you're like, oh, I work in a 10,000 person company, you're not all going to have the same culture. That's silly.
Yeah.
Don't assume that. You'll all have the same values and mission, which should trickle down, but each smaller team or division will have its own, as we like to refer to it as, corporate culture, which really is its own sense of identity. Corporate culture isn't foosball and kombucha on tap anymore. Culture really now is, hey, how do you guys identify in terms of the organism that is your team or your division? Because that's what it is. Mm-hmm. Functions the same way as the human body. They're different parts that have different strengths and different use cases. They may all have the same job, which is, establish and maintain homeostasis. Right? That's all of our organs' jobs ultimately, but they all have strengths in how they do that. And they all have particular roles and purposes in how they do that. So I think one of the things that was really important to me was thinking through the fact that I'm a difficult human to deal with. I am, don't say anything. I am neurodiverse, right? I mentioned I deal with addiction. I'm super strong-headed. And I have a very unique, snarky personality that some people like, some people don't. Right. And how can I create a safe space for people like me and not like me, and understand a little bit more about, hey, what does this look like for me? Brene Brown, huge fan, right? How do we deal with all the shame and things that come up of being imperfect? How can I create a company that is okay with people being imperfect? And so those 5 pillars I touched on earlier, vulnerability, transparency, alignment, which is one I stated a little bit differently earlier, but that alignment between your personal and your professional self, I called it authenticity. That alignment between who you are as a human and what you do for work or how you show up at work, creating those collisions and creating that community, right? So vulnerability, can you find comfort in being uncomfortable? It's really important. This job is uncomfortable. Being a sourcer and a recruiter is uncomfortable. There's no right way to do it. This isn't like a show up, check all the boxes, nailed it. Okay, you did a good job. Mm-hmm. This is like, okay, I achieved the results I wanted, but can I do it better? If you're a business owner listening to this, you're either very comfortable with discomfort, heavily medicated, or freaking out right now. And hopefully not the last one, ideally not the second one either, but got to find ways to get comfortable with discomfort. The transparency piece, be open and honest. If you can't be totally open and honest, realize why and deal with that issue. That's not the way the world's working anymore. Create your parallels between yourself personally and professionally. There are always ways. I promise you that in my day-to-day life, I'm not walking around going, hey, what do you do for a living? It's not my jam. I'm not like a recruiter loving person. But I do find ways to kind of parallel what I do and what I have a passion for. I have a passion for helping. I have a passion for giving back to the community. I have a passion for presenting. So how do I do that? Well, I create alignment then between what I do and get paid to do and what I do because it's a passion of mine and fills me with joy. Collisions, just allowing the space for the interactions however you can. And then community is the last, right? Collaboration, community. Can you be a part of something bigger than yourself? Right? They talk about this in 12-step programs. They always refer to a higher power, but it doesn't have to be that. Cool also, but the idea of, are you a part of something bigger than you? And if you're like, yeah, my company, that's not bigger than you. That's just another organism. Are you a part of something? Is that the recruiting community? Is that a community of leaders? Is that a spiritual community, faith-based? That's totally cool too. It doesn't matter what it is, but is there something that's a foundation for you professionally that is larger than you? And if so, then you've got a great support system. And you've got a great driving factor as to what'll help you make some decisions professionally. So the ways that we do this, and anybody listening, I understand that 90% of this, you're going to be like, oh, I could never do that. I get it. It makes sense. I'm weird and it's my own company, so I can do what I want. But take from it the intent of this and transform it into your own, right? So first is my job descriptions. My job descriptions are written the same way that I speak. So like the phrase, get your shit done is in my job description. Also, I don't really talk about the job a lot. I talk about the company vision. I talk about, sure, like here's what the company does. But I literally have a section, and I'm reading this because I never remember it. Things you should know first. Number one, I'm difficult to work for. I tend to jump from thing to thing. 2, we have a transparent and vulnerable culture. So tough conversations, start, stop, continues. The job is demanding. We're a startup with a get shit done attitude. Sometimes it's slower. Most of the times it's not. I'm snarky and I swear a lot. And it's required that if you work at Wayne Tech that you donate your time to the community in some facet or another. And those are things that if you're thinking, yeah, but some candidates might not like that. Yeah, I know. Let's not waste our time with that. Right. It's same thing when people reach. Yeah. Right. When people reach out about speaking events, like I have an HR compliance event I'd love you to speak at. I'm like, nope, wrong fucking guy. Right. It's like, whoa. Yeah. Your reaction to that thing. That's why I shouldn't speak at your event. Right. And that's okay. We don't have to be everything to everybody. We do have to be unabashedly ourselves and allow people to accept and align with that or to not. And that's okay too. And then our interview process, my wife is horrified by this still. She works for larger companies, she's at Mercer HR now. And our process is a first round interview with me. It's 45 minutes or an hour. And this is the exact same process for everybody. Start off with my question of, hey, tell me about you, any and everything in your entire life that you think could be relevant to us working together. And if this takes the entire interview, that's fine. I want to know everything you want to share. And it tells me everything about that candidate in that moment. Where do they start? They start with their previous job. Okay, they're probably not that self-complexity theory. They're probably not comfortable combining their personal and family lives. Do they start talking about their family and harp on that most of the time? Do they talk about their accomplishments? And it lets me hear, hey, who's this person and what's important to them? How do they describe it? The second they start getting into like, oh, and my last job I did, I'm like, I don't care. Our job's not that complicated. If you're telling me like, oh, you need this experience to be a recruiter, like I'll show you someone who's full of shit. You don't. I could train a 16-year-old to do this job. They just wouldn't have the capacity to kind of stick with it probably at that mental brain development phase. But it's not a complicated, or it's not rocket science.
So what do you think are the qualities that you absolutely non-negotiable need to be a recruiter?
Yeah, curiosity is one, genuine curiosity, not bullshit, which brings to this next part of the interview. Number two is vulnerability, because if you are not comfortable being uncomfortable, this job is going to be uncomfortable. And that was meant to be weird. And then I think, honestly, just a passion for the tactical pieces of the job. So I have a passion for data and technology and spreadsheets. I do not have a passion for talking on the phone. I just don't like it. So guess what? Probably not a great recruiter, probably kick-ass sourcer. Same thing in reverse if you're a recruiter. So the second question I ask is, hey, you can ask me any 3 questions you want in the world, personal, professional, dirty, ugly, bad, inappropriate, does not matter. I will answer them. And it tells me how curious you are. And one of the people I hired, the last young woman I hired, her first question was, tell me about the most magical moment you've ever had in your life. And I was like, what? I need like a minute. Let me think about that. Right? It was taken aback, because that is a curious person who's naturally curious because they want to know. Yeah. Like that's a cool question to ask someone, right? So that's 2. And then the third is we do a vulnerability question or 2 together, and it is terrible. Just terrible. And I tell people ahead of time, this is awful. I'm going to answer first. And I typically would ask, this is normally the first one is, what is the thing you've done in your life that you regret having done more than anything in the world? And what have you done about it since then? And I describe a story where I completely let my sister down. I chose to look cool instead of be there to support her and stick up for her, and the kind of shame and everything it brings up in me when I still think about it, and how I have gone back to her many times and apologized and all of this. And like, I go into the story, I'm like, that's my deal. And people look typically horrified. They're like, oh, I was expecting to talk about like sourcing and Boolean. And like, I'm now describing like the most like despairing, sad moment in my life. But you kick it off
first, right? You give your story first.
I give my answer first.
Set the tonality. Right. Okay.
Yep. Wow. And people, it lets me see how comfortable you being uncomfortable. It's not about the question. I can switch the question. That doesn't matter if there's like a thing for people, but can people be uncomfortable? Because that's an uncomfortable question to answer. If the answer is
uncomfortable job.
No. Yes. And this is an uncomfortable job, right?
Circle for me now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then we do things, just to summarize, we do one-on-ones that are super intense. Happy to connect with the leaders on this one, but we follow a very personal type of approach. And also we take a little bit from Patty McCord's book, Powerful. She was the CHRO of Netflix while they were building, and we do start, stop, continues. So every employee's first week, I'm telling them directly with no fluff, no padding, no sugarcoating, I want you to start doing this thing you're not doing. I want you to stop doing this thing you are doing. And I want you to continue doing this thing that you're doing right now. And then they do the same thing to me 5 days into the job. And it's just like, all right. So Nikeo, I hired at 20 years old, and this 20-year-old guy looking at me, telling me, I want you to start doing this thing you're not doing. His first week, 5 days into the job. And so we do offsites. We hold team meetings every single day, and everybody gives back to the community. So we're playing for something bigger than ourselves.
That's awesome. Wow. That is, it's really inspiring. I'm selfishly absorbing some of this. And I think I need to, we happen to live in the same city, and I need to invite you to lunch and dive deep into those one-on-ones that you guys have, because I would love to implement something like that, just from my own sake, and trying to grow and learn and be a leader. I think I'm great at vulnerability. And sometimes I find myself, or I've seen traditionally, the concept of what a good leader is stoic and hard pressed and very directional and almost perfectly disciplined. And
oh yeah,
it's not the case anymore. And it's really refreshing to hear all of this. I want to ask you really quickly, because I know that this is something that you're truly passionate about, but we think about diversity, knowing that Millennials and Gen Zers are the largest segment of the workforce.
Mhm.
They're a workforce that has grown up online. They're a
Yep.
workforce that is technically the most diverse ever in the history of the workforce. What do you think are some of the preparatory considerations, employers, HR, hirers, recruiters? How are we going to manage this vastly different workforce that no longer cares about healthcare, but really what your social stance is? Tell me about that. So I'd love to hear your 2 cents, although I'm not going to Venmo it to you, Batman.
Yeah, no, I apprecieciate that. I'll try to keep it to 2 cents. So I have a lot of feelings on diversity and inclusion.
Especially in sourcing, right? Because can I just say, diversity and inclusion is not having a diverse team. We are all organically diverse. It's about bringing and creating a program to present more diverse candidates. So you guys are at the crux, the onset, the top of the funnel when it comes to this. Go.
Yeah. So I think I mostly agree with that. I think where I struggle with a problem is when people say I need a diverse candidate. I say, why? If their answer is like, well, we don't have any Black people, I'm like, that's actually not diverse. That's biased. Why? Right? Well, we really want to get a diversity up for underserved communities. It's like, okay, so to be clear, you have a Black candidate from Trinidad and Tobago who comes over a totally different upbringing, right? Like growing up in TNT is wildly different. That would be a diverse candidate. Well, yeah. Okay. What if you had a white guy from Trinidad and Tobago? Exact same way. Is that diverse? If your answer is no, then you're not hiring diversity, you're hiring melanin. And that can be said for sexual orientation. That can be said for gender. Any of that. Why are you doing it is the question. And so we have, as a small company, a wildly diverse culture. We have myself, right? I'm neurodiverse. We have Nikeo, who is a Gen Z who is homeschooled. We have Julia, who is a younger millennial, middle child, Jewish from New York. We have Chris, who is Latter-day Saint, raised in Utah, has a family. He's the only one of us who has married with kids at the time that I hired him. We have Leon, Blue, a Black sorcerer who grew up in the dirty South and then was an army brat. So he moved to Germany for 5 years. And we have Caitlin, who's Asian American, and his grandfather is actually a very famous Christian archaeologist researcher, which is crazy. And then we have Kirsten, who's a single mom veteran. And it's like, yeah, we're super diverse. Did I do that trying to play It's a Small World? No. I did that because they're 51% in alignment with what we stand for and live by, and 49% different and challenging and struggling. In all of the interviews, if everybody goes, oh my gosh, they're going to be the perfect fit, they're blah, 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 we pass. Not interested in that. I want the interviewer where a bunch of us are just like, oh yeah, they'll be great. And somebody's like, I don't think so. This and this and this. I'm like, yup, that's what I want. I want someone who's going to challenge the status quo. I don't want a room full of people who think like I do, and everybody who says, oh, I want that too. Show me. Show me that you actually want that. Show me the reason you let the last 20% of your staff go. Is it performance? If it's performance, you don't believe that shit. Because here's the deal. If someone's not performing, it's for 2 reasons. One, they are not trying hard, which means you are a bad leader and haven't either inspired them to come in alignment with you, or you hired the wrong person. That's a leadership flaw. Or second, you're not training them correctly or giving them the tools to be successful, which is a leadership flaw. So no matter what the answer is, unless it was something either egregious, agreed upon, or on their cause, that's your fault as a leader. So you show me that you want people who think differently in your actions, not your words. I want people who challenge me and anger me. I want people who in our one-on-ones tell me things that are uncomfortable. I want people who tell me they're uncomfortable with how snarky I'm being on Facebook. They think I'm losing clients because of my ego and pride. I want people to tell me that they think it's insulting that I'm 2 minutes late for our meetings because it tells them that they don't care about, that I don't care about them and what they're doing. That's uncomfortable. I don't like that. I love them. So you tell me why you want diversity, and I will tell you how I feel about your diverse hiring scenario. But if you tell me that diverse hiring, DEI hiring is not biased, then you don't understand one of those two words. And here's the thing, I'm okay with biased hiring. I just own it. I want someone different. I do not want someone the same. That doesn't mean I don't want white men in their 30s. That means I don't want someone like me. I don't want someone like the other 6 of us. I want someone who's different. And while they bring 51% of alignment, meaning the things they stand for in life, their values, their mission, their passion, their drive, intellect, whatever it is in that 51% that lines up still. So we've got majority alignment, but I do want there to be rub. I want it to be a challenge. I've got 2 people who work for me who are super math minded. You know how easy it is training Boolean and sourcing to math minded people? It's so easy. It's literally word math. I've got 2 people who are super creative, artsy, visual. You know how hard it is training Boolean to people like that? And they know it. I tell them, this is really tough for me, but that's not their problem. That's mine. I need to find a way to teach it better. An asterisk to this, if you run a company with a bunch of cardiologists in it, please ignore everything I've just told you. You can hire a total asshole. Just make sure they're really good with their hands and know what they're doing. I do not care if my cardiologist is diverse, kind, giving, don't care. You're in my heart. Be really, really good at what you do. Recruiting is not that.
Certainly dealing with people's livelihoods, but not people's lifelines. Got it. Yes. Yes.
Well put.
Yeah, that's a very interesting approach, and it all kind of stems back to a lot of what I've noticed is a recurring theme that you've shared in terms of the wisdom that you have, the New York snarky wisdom. It is really stepping out of your comfort zone. In every sort of messaging that you embody it, I love that. I think there's an element of getting out of your comfort zone, knowing how to be vulnerable, and having that trickle down into every element that you're looking to embody as a leader and across an organization. So very cool. All right. We have to wrap up today's show. We need to do a part 2 because this is just fantastic. And I'm really enthralled on some of the information that you've shared. In the meantime, Mike Batman Cohen, Mike Batman. I feel like I should yell it. Mike Batman Cohen, come on for dinner. Where can we get a hold of you?
The meatloaf. Where can you get a hold of me? Awesome. On most social platforms, my handle on everything is Batman Recruiter. LinkedIn.com/Batman Recruiter. Facebook.com/Batman Recruiter. Twitter.com. You guys are getting the gist here. I also run a Discord server. Discord is a chat program. It's like Slack, but even better, more open source. We have like 650 something recruiters and sourcers from around the world in there. Just ping me, ask if you can join. The answer is going to be yes. And I say this every time and people just don't do it. I really like giving back. It's literally part of our 4 values, right? They're all C's. First one are each other, our colleagues. The second one's community. If you reach out to me, I will answer you, even if I can't help you 100% of the time. Just ping me. I'll be honest if I'm too busy, but reach out. I'll make time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Mike, thanks so much for being on the Ivy podcast. I say this in most of my episodes. Time is honestly the most valuable gift that we can give each other as humans. So we appreciate you spending some time with us. I'm thanking you already for the future time that you're going to spend with us on another episode or some kind of panel, because you are a hoot, buddy, as they say down here in the South. And thank you as well to our listeners for tuning into today's show. We appreciate you guys, and we hope to see y'all on the next episode of the Ivy podcast.
Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely.